So, right, as we promised, much more reaction, of course, to the midterm budget. Cosatu also weighing in. The first Deputy President, Mike Shingange, joins us in studio this evening. Mr. Shingange, thank you very much indeed for your time. Well, you've labelled the midterm budget as disappointing and weak. Tell us why.
No, thank you very much for having us. Look, if you consider just yesterday that the unemployment rate went high for third time consecutively this year, you would have expected much talk in the midterm budget policy statement to speak on how to create more jobs and reduce unemployment. None of such was mentioned in the discussion today, which means that as we move towards the end of the year, we can expect even more higher unemployment percentage, or more and more workers and their families going to face the Black Christmas Day. That's one part of that which is very, very disappointing. There's no mention at all about the implementation of Presidential Job Summit and the Investment Summits that were held last year, to which commitments were made, including the fact that the commitment that was made by business and government in order to at least have a moratorium on the retrenchment while we're looking at ways of creating even more jobs. So in other words, there was no commitment on the part of Treasury to hold those parties to the framework into account on the implementation of the agreement.
And that is somewhat the sense that I got, at least from it, that there'd been quite a lot of those who'd done post-analysis of that speech, saying that there was a lot of this and that needs to happen very soon if we don't want to find ourselves in a worse predicament than we find ourselves as a country at the moment. Is that the sense that you got, that in terms of implementation of some of the things that will address some of these key challenges is not happening?
Well, the sense we got is true, is that indeed something needs to be done. Not something radical needs to be done, departing from what we have been doing over the past 25 years. But this kind of talk that ignores the fact that there was an intervention that was progressive by the government to convene a job summit, of course, on the insistence of labor, but in particular. And you just ignore that, because that was seen as an intervention to go today and finish your speech without even mentioning those investment summit and job summit, including the stimulus packages that the president announced. It actually says you're starting a new thing. Our view, Cosatu, is that over and above other measures, because we would not dismissing the entirety of the speech, there are other things that are welcome. For instance, toned down a little bit on the attack that he wanted to collapse the national minimum wage, he wanted to collapse the collective bargaining in this country through the economic paper that he has released. Through the fact that we pushed back, and we were happy that those things have been removed. But until and unless we accept that the big corporates in this country will not create jobs going forward, and now concentrating on maximizing the price, the profits. At the slightest provocation of economic downturn, they run into workers to retrench workers. That is why over every quarter we're getting people that are being sent to the street, and you talk sending people to the street as a way of intervening to grow the economy. How is the economy going to grow when you're sending people to the street?
But certainly something that can be welcomed is on the issue of state-owned enterprises, Eskom, for example, and the fact that you will no longer have bailouts given to these entities. These are loans that would need to be paid back. Is that something that you welcome as Cosatu?
Any efforts that seeks to rescue our SOEs, we welcome it, because a state needs to put its firm hand and grip on the SOEs as the only leverage they have at their disposal to intervene on the economy, including competing with capital. But we don't think it went far enough on the rest of the other SOEs. Of course, because there was a paper that was released by Minister Gordhan yesterday on Eskom, so maybe the minister today will not say much about that thing. But again, the obsession of government on unbundling Eskom, we have not yet convinced as Cosatu that it's a right way to go, because we're going to be creating 3 new entities, appoint 3 new CEOs, and appointed 3 new boards, and also having a holding company above that. I don't know if that thing's not going to make electricity even more affordable to the South Africans. But also, we would have expected the minister to firmly say, is he appointing a CEO of Eskom, rather than to have Javuma Buza doubling as a chairperson and the CEO at the same time. You can send man there when the lines of accountability are blurred, that the chairperson who's supposed to hold the CEO and management accountable is at the same time the CEO, and we're told is also a service provider. If you don't sort that thing out, you're not going to be turning around the ESCOM anytime soon.
I mean, a depressed economic growth and a tax shortfall certainly would have implications on spending. If you look at key areas such as education and the health sector as well, is that of concern to you in terms of what government is saying at this point in terms of implementing some of what it said it would be to try and relieve some of this?
It's very concerning. In fact, there's been, if you can go back about 8 years in consecutive, the budget on education and health has been cut down, reducing, not just about what is happening now. It's very concerning that the basic social services that a society needs in order to survive, at least as constitutional right, are the ones that are supposed to feel the pain when they need to be budget cut. So we're very concerned. But also, one of the things that did not come out in the speech today is the fact that over 150 billion, which is 10% of the budget every year, according to the Auditor General's report, is going on wasteful expenditures and irregular expenditures and corruption. No mention about how to cap that. I can tell you now, the billions that have been allocated somewhere else today as a way of intervening, if we were to able to stop that every year, we're losing 150 billion. Surely we'll be somewhere in terms of the fiscus there. So that
You're
strategy
talking about corruption and wasteful expenditure.
And wasteful expenditures that are every year the Auditor General reports to Parliament that we're losing it too. Number one. Number two, there's a 50 billion that under expenditure on the infrastructure project in the departments. You're having schools that are not completed, that are no accommodation. That's why we've got a teacher standing in front of 80 to 60 learners because there are not enough classes. You're having kids dying in the pitla trains. When we have got 50 billion that is returned every year, that is not spent on infrastructure, something that we could also have created some jobs. What do you call that? We think that you needed to be firm on that in terms of management, because it's one thing to ask people to cut fat there, but if you don't manage even the small fat that you have, then you're not making any progress.
SAA being one of the issues as well. What is your response to what seemingly looks like some kind of a private individuals possibly who might come into the whole ESCOM debacle?
First, we stand opposed to any selling off, which is why we welcome that the selling off of ESCOM and the coal generators was not mentioned today there, because it's one thing that we had to push back. But the fact that this obsession that the only private sector can run institution effectively and efficiently, it's actually it's not backed by any evidence.
Has been failing. So what option could there be then without some sort of privatization?
Part of the problems we're having on how the SOEs in this country have been run down, we sometimes suspect that it's deliberate, that actually they must make a case, a compelling case why we must privatize. Because even when we make intervention after intervention, but there's still this thing that when you ask a person, what is the plan you have, the only thing he thinks about is that you must sell, as if that selling has ever brought us as any solution. But however, we are prepared to have a discussion about the number of SOEs that we must have, that must be in the hands of the state, and the importance of those SOEs. For instance, we can't afford that ESCOM must be in the hands of private. We can't afford that the workers lose hours and wages because the trains get stuck, or when they must go to work, the employers lose less profit or productivity. That must be fixed in terms of price. We can have a discussion about where we want to go with SAE. Our problem is that it doesn't, and we don't seem even today that we have a plan of what is it that we want to do as a state with our SOEs. We don't seem to have a plan. We just have them, we finance them, but we don't think to be clear on what is it that we want to use this important instrument, which the previous government, by the way, utilized so effectively to, of course, support the few population of this country, bailed out and supported and invested into by our pension monies, but it was saving a fewer population in that time. We don't seem to have that same kind of determination today.
Before we run out of time, I want to talk about the public sector wage bill. I know a part of the statement that you released this afternoon talks to the assumption that in addressing a bloated a public service wage bill, you would get nurses, you would get educators who would suffer. You actually referred to government failing to deal with apartheid-styled wages for those within that sector.
That's correct. South Africa, it is known today as part of the legacy of apartheid as one of the most unequal societies. Just like in the private sector where you will have a CEO earning millions and hundreds of thousands per month and having somebody working in the same institution earning a very low salary there. It's the same thing in the public service. Part of what we've been doing through collective bargaining was to close that apartheid wage gap. That you don't have someone like you were saying today there taking home 1.2 million working for the state, but you're having someone taking only 50,000 per annum, but they are working for the same government. We want to deal with that thing, but it is incorrect to characterize clearly where is the wage bill could be plotted and what is the reason for that. You remember that over the past 9 years we have increased the number of departments, or increased the number of ministers, which included appointing their chief of staffs and director generals. That's one part. It's not at the, at the service delivery or frontline departments, in nurses, in home affairs, in justice, in correctional services, in police. That's not where the public service wage bill is plotted, by the way, because there, if you go to headcount, you can ask the Minister of Public Service Administration today, he will tell you that he needs staff there in terms of the population that we have today and the kind of the number of civil servants that we have today. But when you go up there on top, of course, there's something that needs to be done there. It is not correct
the chopping and the cutting should be at the top.
It is not correct that when the economy is not doing well, whether it's private sector and public sector, you rush the workers for the ones that are the ones to be blamed, while they are not responsible for the economic choices that we make as a government.
All right, Mike Shingange, I'm afraid that's all we have time for. Thank you very much indeed for your time. The first Deputy President of Cosatu, Mike Shingange, talking to us there, unpacking, of course, the mid-term budget speech. We'll take a short break here on The Full View. Sport coming up with Vusiwe in just a moment.